The sea looks calm in the clip, grey water, a low winter sun, and a RIB punching a white scar across the surface. Then you hear it, the thrum of engines behind. Border force. The camera jolts as the chase tightens, a cutter carving through its own wake. Radios crackling, officers braced against the spray. 3 of a 7-strong gang are trying to do the impossible. Outrun the state for 28 miles at sea with a boat full of cocaine. They swerve, they throw weight overboard. Bales hit the water, bob once, then vanish into the chop. On the RHIB, figures hunch low, glancing back, gambling that speed and chaos will erase the evidence. But the coastline is closing in, granite coves, a strip of pale sand dead ahead. One wrong line, one bad wave, and an escape route becomes a trap. The clip ends on that knife-edge moment. This is where our story begins, with a desperate run across open water and an investigation that will unspool from the surf to safe houses, from burner phones to courtrooms. Tonight, we break down the chase that exposed the pipeline of cocaine, the men who crewed it, and the teamwork that shut it down. The sea doesn't forget, and neither do the investigators. On the morning of the 13th of September 2024, Border Force officers aboard the cutter HMC Valiant were patrolling waters off the coast of Cornwall. The stretch of coastline they monitored is one of the most remote in Britain, marked by coves and beaches that make it attractive for smugglers. As the officers scanned the horizon, they picked up a rigid-hulled inflatable boat, or RHIB, moving at speed. The sight of a small craft far out to sea raised suspicion. Intelligence had already pointed to the use of at-sea drop-offs, a smuggling method where drugs are transported on a larger vessel, often described as a mothership, before being offloaded onto smaller boats closer to shore. The RHIB, now in view, fitted the pattern. When Border Force attempted to intercept, the boat accelerated. Inside were 3 men: Peter Williams, a 43-year-old fisherman from Havant; Scott Johnston, 38, also from Havant; and Edwin Yahir Tabora Baka, a 33-year-old man from Barcelona. What followed was a chase lasting nearly an hour, covering 28 miles across the water. The smugglers steered erratically, pushing their vessel to its limits in an effort to escape. As the pursuit continued, the men began to throw their cargo overboard. Bales splashed into the sea one after another, each containing tightly wrapped packages. Later, recovery teams would retrieve 6 of them, weighing approximately 230 kilograms in total. Forensic testing confirmed they contained high-purity cocaine with a potential street value of £18.4 million. Despite their attempts, the fugitives could not outpace the Border Force vessel. Near Penzance, the RHIB ran aground on Gwynver Beach, stranding its crew. Williams, Johnston, and Tabora Baka tried to flee on foot across the sand, but officers were close behind. They were arrested within minutes and taken into custody. What appeared at first to be a dramatic interception at sea was only the beginning. Once the men were secured, the case was handed over to the National Crime Agency. Investigators from the NCA began piecing together how the cocaine had entered British waters, who had organized the run, and how the 7-man group behind the shipment had planned to distribute the drugs once they were ashore. This first arrest exposed only the surface of the conspiracy. Phones, navigation equipment, and other evidence recovered from the RHIB would provide investigators with their first leads, setting the stage for a far-reaching operation into the criminal network responsible. Once the Border Force cutter HMC Valiant identified the rigid-hulled inflatable boat on the 13th of September 2024, the decision was made to give chase. The RHIB was designed for speed. Powered by multiple outboard engines, it was capable of reaching more than 40 knots across open water. For traffickers, this type of vessel offered both the ability to move quickly and the capacity to carry large amounts of drugs. The pursuit began near Newquay. Officers on HMC Valiant closed the distance as the smugglers pushed their boat to full throttle. Over the next 28 miles, the chase moved southwest along the Cornish coast. Sea conditions were challenging, with waves breaking against the hulls of both vessels, but the RHIB's crew held their course, determined to outrun law enforcement. During the chase, the smugglers began discarding their cargo. Border Force officers reported seeing large, wrapped bales thrown into the sea. These were later confirmed to be blocks of high-purity cocaine. The strategy was clear. Without the evidence on board, the men hoped their arrest would not result in major charges. But the Border Force cutter kept the RHIB under constant observation, ensuring that every movement, including the dumping of drugs, was documented. The pursuit lasted almost an hour. Despite the smugglers' efforts, the heavier but more stable Valiant maintained pressure, staying close enough to prevent escape. The chase came to a dramatic conclusion near Penzance. The smugglers tried to steer toward the shore, aiming for the beach at Gwynfor. Their vessel struck the sand at speed, grounding itself in the shallows. Williams, Johnston, and Tabora Bakker abandoned the boat immediately. They ran across the sand in an effort to escape on foot. Officers from Border Force landed quickly and moved in. The three men were caught within minutes and detained on the beach. Back at sea, recovery operations began. 6 bales of cocaine were pulled from the water. In total, they weighed around 230 kilograms. Experts later confirmed the drugs were of high purity, with a potential street value of more than £18 million. Items recovered from the RHIB included a chart plotter used for navigation, knives, and other equipment consistent with smuggling operations. The attempted escape had ended in failure. What began as a chase on open water now turned into a major investigation. The arrests on Gwynfor Beach provided the entry point for the National Crime Agency, whose task was to uncover who else had been involved in the conspiracy and how the drugs had been arranged for delivery into the United Kingdom. The arrests on Gwynfor Beach on the 13th of September 2024 marked only the beginning of the case. Once the 3 men were taken into custody, the scale of the operation became clearer. Border Force secured the grounded RHIB and began a full search. On board, they recovered navigation equipment including a Garmin chart plotter, as well as knives and other items consistent with organized smuggling activity. The chart plotter showed the route the men had taken across the water, evidence that would later be used in court to demonstrate their involvement. Meanwhile, recovery teams were dispatched to search the waters along the chase route. 6 bales were retrieved, each tightly wrapped in plastic. Forensic testing confirmed they contained cocaine of high purity. The total weight was approximately 230 kilograms, with an estimated street value of £18.4 million. This alone established the seriousness of the conspiracy. The 3 men arrested were quickly identified. Peter Williams was a 43-year-old fisherman from Havant, whose own vessel had previously been damaged in a storm. Investigators later suggested his financial struggles may have made him vulnerable to recruitment. Scott Johnston, aged 38 and also from Havant, was known locally but had no legitimate explanation for being on the boat that day. The third man, 33-year-old Edwin Yahir Tabora Bakker from Barcelona, initially tried to claim he was a tourist invited on a fishing trip. That story fell apart when officers examined his phone. Digital forensics became central to the investigation. Messages on Tabora Bakker's device linked him directly to the cocaine run. One photograph showed the bales of cocaine on board the rigid hull inflatable boat before they were dumped into the sea. Location data and chat records confirmed coordination with others not present during the chase. This gave the National Crime Agency the evidence they needed to expand the inquiry. Back in London, NCA officers began mapping the wider network. Phone analysis revealed contacts with men in Essex and elsewhere who were waiting to receive the drugs once they landed. CCTV footage and surveillance tied additional suspects to the conspiracy. Within weeks, names including Michael May, Terry Willis, Bobby Pearce, and Alex Fowley had been drawn into the investigation. By the end of 2024, the evidence had established that the men arrested on the beach were not acting alone. They were part of a 7-strong group responsible for attempting to bring hundreds of kilograms of cocaine into the UK. From this point forward, the case shifted from a dramatic sea chase to a painstaking investigation, where every device, every recovered item, and every digital trace was examined to build the full picture. The investigation carried out by the National Crime Agency made it clear that the 3 men arrested on Gwynfor Beach were part of a larger criminal group. In total, 7 individuals were identified as being directly involved in the cocaine smuggling attempt. Peter Williams, aged 43 from Havant, was a fisherman with detailed knowledge of the sea. His background made him valuable to the operation. Investigators learned that his own fishing boat had been badly damaged in a storm, leaving him under financial pressure. Prosecutors later suggested that these circumstances made him more willing to take the risk of joining a smuggling run. Alongside him on the RHIB was Scott Johnston, aged 38, also from Havant. Johnston was described as a trusted associate, willing to take part in the high-risk journey at sea. The third crew member was Edwin Yahir Tabora Bata, a 33-year-old from Barcelona. He attempted to portray himself as a visitor who had been misled, but digital evidence on his phone, including photographs of the drugs, messages, and contact with other conspirators, proved his direct involvement. The network extended well beyond the 3 men on the RHIB. In Essex, Michael May, aged 47 from Brentwood, and Terry Willis, aged 44 from Chelmsford, were waiting to collect the shipment once it reached land. Both were later proven to have played significant roles in coordinating the movement and planned distribution of the cocaine. May had a history of involvement in drug supply, while Willis was also linked to money laundering and firearms offenses. Another member of the group was Bobby Pierce, aged 29, also from Brentwood. He was connected to the conspiracy through communication records and surveillance. Pierce was part of the onshore team, expected to help receive and transport the cocaine. The 7th conspirator was Alex Fowley, aged 35, from Chichester. He was responsible for purchasing the RHIB used in the smuggling attempt, sourcing it from North Wales before the operation. Investigators also found that Fowley had travelled to Newquay, where he coordinated with the rest of the group. Even after the failed sea run, audio recordings from his phone revealed that he was already planning further pickups. In one message, he described a future operation as carrying 0 risk. Together, the 7 men formed a chain stretching from the waters off Cornwall to the distribution networks inland. The use of an at-sea drop-off showed a high level of organization, linking South American suppliers to European and British contacts. For investigators, proving the role of each man was essential to bringing the entire conspiracy before the courts. By 2025, the National Crime Agency and Crown Prosecution Service had gathered enough evidence to charge all 7 men with conspiracy to import Class A drugs. The scale of the case and the amount of cocaine involved meant the prosecutions were handled at a high level, with hearings held at Crown courts. The first trial focused on 4 of the men: Scott Johnston, Edwin Yahir Tabora Baka, Michael May, and Terry Willis. In August 2025, the court heard how Johnston and Tabora Baka had been part of the RHIB crew who attempted to outrun Border Force. May and Willis, meanwhile, had been part of the onshore operation in Essex, preparing to receive the shipment. The evidence against them included phone records, digital messages, and the recovery of cocaine bales from the sea. On the 1st of August 2025, sentences were handed down. Johnston received 24 years in prison. Tabora Baka was jailed for 17 years and 7 months. May was sentenced to 19 years, while Willis received 21 years and 8 months. These punishments reflected both their direct involvement and the seriousness of attempting to bring cocaine worth millions of pounds into the UK. A second sentencing followed later that month. On 21st August 2025, Peter Williams and Bobby Pierce faced judgment for their roles. Williams, who had used his experience as a fisherman to help crew the RHIB, was sentenced to 16 years and 9 months. Pierce, identified as part of the receiving team, was jailed for 15 years and 4 months. That left 1 man still to face court. Alex Fowley, the 35-year-old from Chichester who had bought the RHIB and was caught on recordings planning further operations, was due to be sentenced on the 5th of September 2025. Prosecutors argued that his involvement was critical to the conspiracy and his sentence was expected to be lengthy. Across both hearings, the combined prison terms already exceeded 82 years. Senior figures from law enforcement described the results as a major success. The National Crime Agency stated that the disruption of the network had prevented hundreds of kilograms of cocaine from reaching UK streets. Border Force highlighted the effectiveness of joint operations at sea and the importance of vigilance against at-sea drop-off smuggling methods. For the 7 men, the outcome marked the end of their operation and the beginning of long custodial terms. For investigators, it was another example of how persistence, evidence gathering, and international cooperation could dismantle even well-organized criminal groups. The 28-mile chase off the Cornish coast was dramatic in itself, but its importance went beyond the arrests on Gwynfor Beach. For law enforcement, the case was another demonstration of how organized crime groups have shifted towards at-sea drop-off tactics. By transferring drugs from a larger vessel to smaller, fast craft close to shore, traffickers reduce the risk of interception in ports. The attempt in September 2024 showed how these methods are now being used against the UK. The cocaine seized during the operation, about 230 kilograms in total, had an estimated street value of £18.4 million. According to the National Crime Agency, preventing its distribution meant protecting communities from addiction, violence, and exploitation linked to the cocaine trade. The agency emphasized that even large seizures represent only part of the challenge. Organized crime groups remain determined to supply the UK market, and enforcement must continually adapt to counter their methods. The sentences handed down in August 2025 also sent a clear signal. With terms ranging from 15 to 24 years, the courts showed that those involved in major smuggling conspiracies can expect severe punishment. Senior figures from both the NCA and Border Force welcomed the outcome, noting the strength of the cooperation between agencies at sea and on land. Locally, the case made headlines across Cornwall. Residents living near Gwynfor Beach described their surprise at seeing Border Force officers apprehending suspects on the sand. The remote coastline, normally associated with tourism and leisure, had briefly become the scene of a major drug bust. For some, it underlined how international trafficking networks can reach even the quietest parts of the UK. The investigation also revealed the personal circumstances of those involved. Williams, the Havant fisherman, had suffered financial difficulties after losing his own boat in a storm. Johnston and Tabora Bucker were willing to take the risks of the sea run, while May, Willis, and Pearce coordinated the receiving side in Essex. Fowley sourced the vessel and continued to plan further operations even after the failed attempt. Together, their actions showed how organized crime groups draw in people with different skills and connections. In the months following the sentencing, law enforcement agencies highlighted the case as a model of successful intervention. By intercepting the RHIB, recovering the cocaine, and securing convictions, the authorities had disrupted a major supply line. Yet, they also acknowledged that new attempts would come, and that vigilance on land and sea would remain essential. The chase that began off Cornwall on the 13th of September 2024 was only a small part of a much larger story. It began as a sighting of a fast-moving boat, developed into a dramatic 28-mile pursuit, and ended with 7 men facing long prison terms. The case showed how quickly an operation designed to bring millions of pounds of cocaine into the United Kingdom could unravel once law enforcement intervened. For investigators, the outcome reinforced several key lessons. First, the use of at-sea drop-offs remains a major threat. Traffickers rely on speed, remote landing points, and the ability to discard evidence into the water. In this case, 6 bales were recovered, but more may have been lost to the sea. Second, the case demonstrated how digital evidence can dismantle cover stories. Tabora Bucker's claim of being a tourist collapsed once phone data showed photos of the cocaine and messages with conspirators. Similarly, recordings from Alex Fowley's device revealed ongoing planning, undermining any suggestion that the smuggling run was a one-off. The combined sentences of more than 82 years sent a strong deterrent message. Johnston's 24 years, Willis's 21 years and 8 months, and May's 19 years stood out among the longest sentences imposed in recent drug importation cases. Even those on the periphery of the sea chase, like Pierce and Williams, received terms of more than 15 years. With Fowley still awaiting sentencing in early September 2025, the total is expected to rise further. Beyond the figures and prison terms, the case had a wider impact. For the communities of Cornwall and beyond, it showed that the drug trade is not confined to major cities. Rural coastlines, small harbors, and remote beaches can all become gateways for organized crime. For the agencies involved, it provided a reminder of the value of close cooperation. Border Force intercepted the vessel, but it was the National Crime Agency that connected the dots, building the conspiracy case from phones, CCTV, and forensic analysis. The smugglers hoped that speed and secrecy would protect them. Instead, the sea left traces that could not be erased, and the investigation turned those traces into convictions. The 28-mile chase is now part of the record of how Britain's borders are defended and how organized crime groups are dismantled, one operation at a time.